It was near the end of October last year, which always makes for the best hiking weather, as it's not too hot and not too cold. I had a group of friends that I'd go hiking with a lot, but most of them had jobs with no set schedules, making it hard to find days when we could plan a hike together. So, often I'd go for some shorter hikes alone and just enjoy the peace and quiet. I had the weekend off, so I found a nice hiking and camping trail nearby and drove up there on Saturday morning. I had actually been on this trail a couple of years before and had always wanted to go back. It was a loop trail, so it basically went in a big circle from the start, and it was around a day and a half long. I parked my car in a small gravel parking lot and made my way up to the trailhead. The first few miles were flat and mainly just went through grassy fields before eventually leading into a forest at the bottom of a small mountain. At this point, it was probably midday, and I was well into the forest when I saw a man walking up ahead. He was too far for me to tell at first if he was walking towards or away from me, but as I continued forward, I realized he was walking towards me. This wasn't a very popular trail, and the last time I hiked it, I don't think I saw anyone. But it was the weekend, and I figured maybe he just had the same idea as me. As he got closer, though, I noticed he didn't have a backpack on, which was pretty unusual as I was probably 6 or 7 hours down the trail, and there was no way someone would go this far without even a water bottle. He waved at me once he was a few feet ahead. I returned the gesture to be polite, but I was still being cautious due to being in such an isolated area. As he passed, I heard his footsteps stop, and the dirt crumbled as if he turned around. I looked back, and sure enough, he was facing me. Then he asked me something really strange. "Where's your group at?" I wasn't sure how to respond, as all I could really think about was whether this stranger knew that I usually had a group or if he was just trying to figure out that I was alone. Either way, it was unsettling and made me really nervous. I responded, telling him that they were on their way, a couple of minutes behind me. I couldn't think of anything else to say, but I definitely didn't want this man to think that I was alone. "Good," he replied, then smiled and began walking again. I continued on in the opposite direction, further down the trail. A few hours went by, and I spent most of the time thinking about that guy and how weird the whole situation was. The fact that he didn't have a backpack so deep into the hike made the whole thing even more unsettling. I decided I'd find a good place a little ways off the main trail to set up my campsite, just to be safe. I found a nice flat area about half a mile from the trail and pitched my small tent. The sun was starting to set, so I sat outside my tent and just tried to stop thinking about the guy. I had a pre-packed lunch made for the trip, so I got that out and finished it before laying in the tent to try and get some sleep. I was lying there for probably over an hour, unable to sleep, when I started to hear footsteps coming from the trees behind my tent. I froze, listening to them moving towards me. I tried to reason with myself in my head that it was probably just some animal or something, but the steps were all too recognizable as a person's. It sounded like they were 15 to 20 feet away when they suddenly stopped. I waited there for what felt like hours, laying still and listening intently with my heart racing, but there were no more footsteps. I knew they had to be waiting nearby, as I would have heard the footsteps fade out if they had left. Eventually, more hours passed, and the sun was just starting to rise. I knew I had to get out of there at some point, and I was so tired that I was questioning if maybe I'd somehow just not heard the footsteps going away. I unzipped the tent and lifted the flap up a little to peek outside, but I didn't see anything. So I got out and looked around. It was very quiet, and the trees were blocking most of my view, but from what I could see, nobody was there. After a few minutes, I cautiously packed up my tent, still looking around frequently, as I was definitely on edge and every small noise would make me jump. I attached my tent to my bag and started heading back towards the trail as quickly as I could. But I only made it a few steps before noticing clear footprints in the dirt just behind a tree that was right by where I had my tent. I began panicking and didn't even look for any more footsteps as I sprinted towards the trail. I was terrified now, as I knew there was someone stalking me in the middle of an isolated forest, hours away from anywhere safe. Once I got back to the path, I quickly began walking back down the way I came. It was probably quicker at this point just to continue down, but I figured that whoever was watching me would probably be waiting for me to continue that way. Luckily, nothing else happened the whole way back to my car, which I didn't get to until nearly sunset. I told my friends about the strange man and what I heard and saw, and they all said that I was lucky to get out of there without anything else happening. I contacted the police just to report the suspicious activity on the trail, but not much was able to get done about it. I'm definitely more cautious when hiking and camping now, and I rarely go without my group of friends anymore. I will never know what that guy's true intentions were, and I hope nobody else has to know either.